Hello，大家好，你好，欢迎来我们这场MuckerLab 的 event。那我们今天也特地邀请我们 MuckerLab 的创办人William 徐来为我们做这个创办经验的分享，以及他本身的之前的经验啊，还有帮助我们很多的新创的成功的经验。那今天的 agenda 大概会是我们一开始，因为我们现在是很感谢受到经济部中小企业处的邀请，那我们进驻亚湾新创园，所以我们很高兴邀请到中小企业处的谢龙峰主任秘书来为我们做开场。那之后我会简单的介绍 MuckerLab， 还有我们的创办人以及 Managing Partner William 徐，还有我们的主持人Just Kitchen 的 COO Kenny 吴。那之后我们就会请他们两位做我们这个 Fireside Chat。到最后呢，会有简单的 Q&A， 所以如果大家有任何的问题，都欢迎写在旁边的这个 Chat Room。那我们会选择一些问题，到最后让 Ken 去做这个问答。那最后我会简单的做收尾，大概是这样子。所以我们现在很荣幸的来请我们谢龙峰主任秘书为我们做开场致辞，谢谢。
谢谢谢谢。这其实在线上应该很多是老朋友也有一些新朋友那各位早安，还有晚安因为台湾这边是早上，那加州那边是晚上，所以我们刚好这个时间早安晚安都有那谢谢那个William 还有 Jerry 还有Ken Mark 来跟我们去做一些去介绍在有关那个新创投资的一些辅导的一些理念那其实我们这个等于上次有一个因缘机会，我们去就是加州次长带着我们去还有我们处长然后一起去加州招商，然后跟Mucker 这边 MuckerLab 这边有一些接触所以开始有一些我们好的开始，然后彼此之间我们就看怎么样在台湾可以落地那很高兴在亚湾这个地方我们终于可以落地了那彼此之间看怎么样去激荡一些好的火花，然后出来那其实高雄的亚湾现在目前为止是我们等于经济部在就是重中之重在推动的地方，那希望能够跟着就是我们一些整个一些新创的脚步，然后一起来把这个地方可以发展好。然后亚湾其实在那个12月6号已经开幕了就在去年的时候。然后那其实这里面包含AIoT 数位内容，还有一些智慧科技等等这些的整个内容都是一个很重要的一些内容。然后我们有一些很多新创都已经进去包含有42家的整个新创，还有7家的一些加速器能够在这边去做一些发展。那我们希望能够就把林口的整个经验把它到整个亚湾去能够去做起来。当然 MuckerLab 是一个重中之重我们希望能够把那个美国的成功经验带来台湾，然后跟台湾去做一些连接，然后可以把整个台湾的产业跟美国的产业做一个最好的联动。那最后还是一样，就代表中企处还有亚湾特别欢迎大家今天的一些莅临，而且这是一个含金量非常高的。那希望Mucker还有一些就是我们这边像威廉等等这些算是非常老的整个新创能够给我们最好的一些分享，然后让我们新创有更好的一些经验，然后看怎么样在全球发展。谢谢谢谢。
好的，谢谢主秘的这个致辞以及指导。那我来简单的介绍 MuckerLab。那大家好，我是 Jerry 陈。那我目前也是进驻在这个亚湾新创园的 MuckerLab 的台湾以及亚洲的代表。那 MuckerLab 呢是12年的时候开始，那我们在南加州洛杉矶成立也是由我们的威廉许维亮先生共同创办。那我们主要是在投资以及辅导 早期的新创，在网络以及软体相关的新创，不过各个产业都有看。那我们主要是投资在从种子前就 Pre-seed 到种子 C 跟 A 轮之间的新创。那目前我们大概一半的这个投资的新创大概是 B2B， 一半是 B2C。那我们之前虽然主要是在北美，那我们前2年也开始在看台湾及亚洲的新创。那待会儿这个我相信William也有更多的一些经验的分享。那今天很荣幸邀请到William，他的background我这里也简单的介绍一下。之前是 Stanford 跟 Wharton 的 MBA 毕业，那后来也是自己创业，那得到了一大笔资金。那后来呢，他也很荣幸的加入这个 eBay， 那后来也做到这个 AT&T 的这个 EVP 全球的副总裁。那后来和他的 partner Eric Adriana 一起创办的这个 MuckerLab， 那也后来我们也有自己的基金叫 Mucker Capital， 那我们目前掌管的基金也超过这个90亿美金，那相信他之后有更多的这个经验的分享。我们已经孕育出一些独角兽，像说 Honey 他已经被 PayPal 40亿美金并购，还有 Service Titan 已经超过这个95亿美金的估值等等等等，相信William之后会有更多的这个分享。那我们这次也很荣幸邀请到Kenny 吴他也是这个William跟我之前在 LA 的朋友Ken 认识Will也是很久的时间了，那很高兴邀请他。那 Ken 呢，他之前是在这个Pepperdine 跟这个 UCSD 毕业，那之后就是一个连续的创业家。那最后一次的这个创业是 Milk and Eggs， 他也成功的被这个 Group Up 并购。那后来也是在台湾加入了 Just Kitchen， 那他也是这个 Just Kitchen 也是成功的在加拿大上市，那也是William 跟 Mucker 投资的一家公司。那他们主要是在提供这个Virtual Kitchen 的一些brands 的一些的云端厨房的一些这个品牌的，然后给台湾以及东南亚的客户能够享受到美味的这个餐点。那现在呢，我们很荣幸的就邀请到 Kenny 能够访问 William， 那有一辆 Fireside Chat， 那我们就欢迎他们。All right, thank you very much. Let's welcome Kenny and Will. The floor is yours.
Wonderful, Jerry. Thank you. That was 不好意思，我会转换，感谢这个 Jerry 的这个介绍。我们这个做访问的时候会转换成英文。So, Jerry, thank you for that very comprehensive and great introduction. It's my honor and privilege to be here with Will, a very good friend and longtime friend. I think Jerry mentioned already all the accolades and all the accomplishments of Mucker. So I think we're all very familiar with it. I think he did leave out Mucker at this point is one of the top venture capital firms in Silicon Beach and across the US. So highly regarded and very well recognized. Will, anything else you like to add or that we left out?
Nothing yet. But
Okay.
I think it's important for me to talk a little bit about my personal background in Taiwan. 我其实是台湾长大的，在台北东区，然后移民到美国。那虽然这个 interview 是用英文讲，因为我的英文比较，尤其是讲business的话比较流利，不过其实中文听得懂，会写会读。那我还是台湾护照都还有，所以我真的也是个台湾人啊。
Wonderful. That's great. Wow. That's very impressive. I think definitely conversing back and forth, especially for business terminology between English and Chinese, can be challenging. As a quick reminder, if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw it into the chat. We'll have a Q&A session at the very end. Okay. But Will, no, thanks for that background. I think you went to Zhang'ai Guoxiao, right?
I did. I did. Yeah.
in Taipei, right?
Yeah, 在南路四段长大的.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm very familiar with that area. I'm sure potentially even some of our audience has previously attended. That's great. Wow. So I think it would be helpful, and I think some of the people might love to hear about your transition from Taiwan to the US. I think you went to Stanford, and then maybe potentially even your first startup, and kind of hear some of the stories that you have experienced during that process.
Yeah, so I immigrated to actually Guam for my first year, where I learned English. I was about 10 years old. It was 1981. And I didn't have any English education at all back then. So it was kind of a tough road. I was supposed to be in 5th grade. And because my English was so bad, they made me start in 3rd grade. And it was the first time in my life, and really the only time in my life, that I was the tallest guy in my class. So I actually kind of enjoyed being kind of in 3rd grade when I was supposed to be in 5th grade. After a year in Guam, kind of learning a little bit of English, the family moved to San Jose, where I grew up. And my father is in the contract manufacturing business. So like a lot of people his age and a lot of kind of leaders in Taiwan, that's kind of what they did. So I grew up kind of in a factory environment. I remember growing up, going to the factory on weekends. My dad worked on weekends and I had to go work on weekends and help him. And that really instilled in me this idea that entrepreneurship is a viable path, and the way to win is to work hard. You don't necessarily have to be the smartest guy. You don't necessarily have to be someone special. But what you do need is this like DNA around kind of working hard and really understanding your customer and listening to them. Like a lot of Taiwanese families in San Jose at the time, the ultimate goal for your kids is to go to Stanford. And I was very, very lucky. So I got into Stanford, and therefore my parents didn't disown me when the time comes to go to college. At Stanford, I studied industrial engineering, again, kind of a factory background. Factory management really was that major. Interesting enough, at Stanford, that major is already starting to transition, right? This was the beginning of the internet boom. And at least half of the curriculum for Stanford at the time was really focused around startup management and engineering management, from the concept of software product and software management, no longer just factory, right? Because the world was moving from hardware to software. So it was instilled very early in me at Stanford that, starting a software company, from my father's background, from the education, from the fact that we were right next to Silicon Valley and right next to Sand Hill Road in Palo Alto, was something that I really wanted to do. I graduated in 1998. I took my first job as not in anything having to do with engineering. I became an investment banker, working for one of the most well-known investment bankers at the time, helping internet companies go public in the stock exchange. I did that for 10 months. I think I worked 18 hours a day. I didn't see any of my friends. I lived in the office. I ate at the office. All I did was went back to my apartment to sleep. And I realized I was working way too hard for kind of the salary I was getting paid, and that all the entrepreneurs that were kind of going public and I was helping with wasn't that much different than me. A lot of them were, a little bit older, like 25, 26, 27. So I thought, hey, like, if Jerry Yang can do it, and so could William, right? So in 1999, I quit my job as an investment banking analyst and started my first software company. The company was called BuildPoint. The world was very different than now, which meant that all you really need is an idea, a deck, and a great background to raise money. Because without at least a couple $1 million, you can't even buy enough software and servers and bandwidth to actually set up a website. Today, you can do it with $50 on Amazon, right? And I turned out to be exactly what VCs were looking for, right? An engineering undergrad from Stanford with investment banking experience in tech, and then being Taiwanese. Because 2-3 years ago, a Taiwanese guy called Jerry Yang from Stanford with an engineering degree created Yahoo. So the VCs just happened to kind of like love this profile and thought I was the perfect guy. So even before having a product, I was able to raise $50 million and build a team of hundreds of people and have offices all across the US. Unfortunately, I was not quite ready to be an entrepreneur. I was very far from being like Jerry Yang. We built the business in a way that created a ton of audience and a very big footprint, but it was actually a highly unprofitable business. I didn't know anything about building a business. So when the market crashed in 2001, I was fired by my VCs, and I spent a year kind of wondering what happened. Right? Like no one would actually hire a .com. Right. The point of the story is that there's hard work and there's success and there's failure, and you can't really control success or failure, but you control how hard you work and you control your resiliency and your ability to keep going. So after I got fired from my own startup, I took an entry-level job at eBay where I met my current partner, Eric Vinala, who was actually my boss, and then rebuilt a career.
That's amazing. Wow. So started from eBay on the bottom, but that's an amazing story with a build point in your own startup. Absolutely. So takeaway, you can only control how hard you work, because that's the only thing that's within your realm of responsibility, right? That's amazing. Wow, great. Good story. Now, obviously, that turned into, I think, eBay, you met Eric, and then I think there was a Yellow Pages, and then obviously Mucker, right, back in 2011.
Yeah, I went into the operating
Mucker's
world for about 10 years.
Exactly, and got some great experience, corporate experience.
Yep.
And decided to convert, take all that experience and move it into venture capital and go back to essentially what you started with, kind of back into the startup space. Oh, that's wonderful. Now, I think Mucker's done, now, based on obviously what I've seen and kind of everyone else knows, Mucker's done very well in the last 11 years. What would you say is the differentiator between Mucker and another venture firm, both an ethos or thesis?
Yeah, so when we started Mucker 11 years ago, there were no venture funds in LA and barely any entrepreneurs. And it took us a long time to raise money. Our first fund was only $1 million of our own money. I remember at 22, I raised $50 million. So money was really easy, but all of a sudden money was hard. Like nobody would invest in Mucker in the early days because nobody believed that you could actually build unicorns and have a successful venture fund based outside of the Bay Area. So the Bay Area VCs have gotten kind of fat and happy and complacent around the way they invest. And the way they invest is they look for people that look like me. People with the right backgrounds, with the right pattern matches, with the right people, knowing the right people with the right networks. What they don't want to invest in is someone that's outside of that network with a different profile that doesn't have the right friends. At Mucker, we don't care about anything like that, right? Because based on my experience, I fit all the checkboxes. I was from Stanford. I had an engineering degree. I was Taiwanese, right? I was in the same circle as Jerry. And I wasn't that successful. So I know that doesn't mean success. Success is something else. What we look for at Mucker is we look for a big idea, a big problem, and an entrepreneur that's passionate about solving that problem, has unique knowledge about that problem. I don't care where they went to school. I don't care who they know. I want to know that they're passionate about the problem and they have a unique insight. And we're looking for entrepreneurs that are resilient against failure. Right? Like in my own experience, failure was a big part of my life. And eventually, we were able to kind of build a firm. So we wanted entrepreneurs that were resilient and will continue to solve that problem over and over and over again and incrementally create a better solution. Right? It is not about being right the first time. It's about being eventually right. And the entrepreneurs that can have the resiliency to try multiple times have a higher success kind of likelihood than an entrepreneur who only tries once or twice, 3 times, right? So for us, unlike other venture funds, we're really focused on investing in a specific profile, in a specific location. We just cared about an entrepreneur's ability to solve and continue to solve a problem that they're passionate about. And we keep our company super lean initially before getting to product market fit, before getting to revenue. And we will only really invest significant capital into the companies once they're trying to scale. And that's has allowed us to be very capital efficient in the way that we deploy money. I remember our first fund was only $1 million, and we're able to generate hundreds and hundreds of $1 million in return for our investors, right? And that's that created a completely different model, right? So even today, it's really, really hard for Bay Area VCs to invest in the early stages of companies outside of the Bay Area, right? And we help companies at these early stages, and then eventually when they get to certain revenue, the Bay Area funds will eventually come in. So we like to stay and invest in the early stages to help the company off the ground, and then at the later stages, help them raise money from the best venture funds in the Bay Area. This is relevant to this conversation in Taiwan today, right? Because Taiwan reminds me of Los Angeles 10 years ago, right? This idea that no one, especially the name brand VCs, don't really see Taiwan as a place to invest. 10 years ago, they didn't see LA either, right? So I very much believe there's a great opportunity here.
So that's great. So great bet on Taiwan and well, great bet on LA, and I'm sure everyone here is very happy to hear about your about betting on Taiwan as well. I love the two principles from what you were saying. It's I guess resilience and iterating, right? I think those are amazing. I think two fundamental precepts in any startup and any founder. Well, are there any? I guess I'm sure there are many examples of startups and founders that you have had experience in your career. Any one that you like to share about, either successful or unsuccessful?
Mucker right now is very well known for honey, which was sold to PayPal about 3 years ago to PayPal. Sold to PayPal 3 years ago for about $4 billion. It was the biggest exit in the history of Los Angeles, and obviously at the time, biggest exit for Mucker. And the entrepreneurial journey is never straightforward. It's not a single straight line. It's convoluted, it's circular, it's curved, and sometimes it falls on top of each other. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't get lucky. And honey's the best example. I met the founders the first time in 2011, and we said no to investing in them. And no one else did, luckily for me, for a whole year before they came back, and then I finally invested. The original founder of the company had to take a job and kept the company on ice and the product on ice, and had to recruit another founder to actually be the CEO because he had a family to feed. Right? Like they actually just kept the company alive because they couldn't find any money. In fact, 2 years after Mucker invested, they still couldn't raise any money. And the same founder went back to his old job and had to just take a salary while the other founder run the business. It took another 2 years for the company to make enough money revenue-wise, not even capital, not from VCs, but revenue-wise, for the founder to come back and join the firm again. Right? So he left the company twice and kept coming back. At Series A, at Series B, at Series C, the company always had a problem fundraising, which forced the founders to be very focused on generating revenue and getting to profitability. By Series A, with only 15 employees, the company was already profitable. When the company was sold in 2018, it was doing about $300 million in revenue a year, with $50 million in cash flow to the bottom line every year. Today, it's generating over $1.5 billion in revenue for PayPal, right? So, like, the way I think about startups is there's always a path to survive, right? The standard path of raising 1 million, 5 million, 15 million, 30 million, 50 million, that's great, and that's available, and that's the playbook for a lot of Bay Area startups. But outside of the Bay Area, in LA, in Nashville, in Austin, in Toronto, and in Taiwan, You really have to be flexible in the way when you think about defining your path as an entrepreneur and defining the path of a startup. If you survive, if you focus on your customer, if you generate revenue, you will continue to build and grow. And at some point, you might create $1 billion companies because you survived, because you didn't give up, because you found a way to generate revenue beyond venture capital.
What an amazing story, Will. That's I think it's a full look deep into kind of behind the walls of what actually happened, because, you know, from at least what I've seen, did very well, right? Started in 2011, exited in 2018 for $4 billion in 7 years. But you don't hear any of those stories, right?
Yeah,
publish that.
You know, people want to be smart and they want amazing kind of like success, overnight success story, right? That's the stuff that gets printed. How everybody's smart and they're amazing. It's not because they got lucky and everything is like overnight, right? But the real story is everything takes a long time. Everything is a struggle. And if you keep at it long enough, you get lucky enough times, you will build a great business eventually.
How inspiring. So obviously Will and Mucker are supportive of these founders, even through these trials and tribulations and pivots and changes and iterations, right? And ultimately end up like fingers crossed, end up like a honey. Wonderful. I think aside from honey, there's been obviously other ones as well. There's one, I think, on the verge of IPOing this year, potentially. I think ServiceTitan may potentially even be a bigger IPO than, well, of course, Honey was an acquisition as opposed to an IPO, so it's a little bit different. But any experience with ServiceTitan? I think you were in very early with them as well.
Yeah, with ServiceTitan, we were their first ever outside check. When we invested, it was just two guys literally living on the attic of their parents' garage, building the business. They have never worked in any other job before. They graduated from college and started ServiceTitan. They did not take a job at an investment bank. They didn't take a job with a consulting firm. They didn't even take a job at McDonald's. They had no idea what it meant to work. They just wanted to build the product. And the product was something that they wanted to build for their parents. So their parents were, they owned a big franchise, so they were doing well, a big franchise of plumbing and electrical contractors, serving, homeowners here in LA. And they want to build software for their parents who needed something better to kind of run their business. And they thought they could do it. They started the company and could not fundraise until Mucker for 2 years. For 2 years, they were trying to build the product, couldn't find product market fit, couldn't generate any revenue, and they didn't quit. I don't take any credit for that because we didn't find them until 2 years later. But even that, they lived off savings and like making no money for 2 years while they built the product and trying to get the product market fit. It was only when we invested, they finished building the product and we taught them how to sell, how to go to market, and how to kind of generate revenue. At the time when we invested, VCs didn't really view vertical SaaS as a big enough industry to generate the type of returns that companies will go public. And they were very, very wrong. ServiceTitan today does $550 million in revenue. There are obviously lots of rumors on them going public. And yes, it is a multiple times bigger company than Honey. It will be the biggest exit for Mucker when and if that happens. And that journey is also not straightforward. After raising about $150K from Mucker, they could not fundraise for about 3 years. And they were forced, again, like the Honey guys, to sell software to generate revenue in order to feed their employees, right, and feed themselves. So they just focused on growing and selling their software and making more money. The next round that they raised was a $20 million round. Right? They didn't raise $1 million. They didn't raise $3 million or $5 million. They went from raising $150K to raising $20 million. and they just had such a great product that they do not need venture capital to grow. All they need to do was sell more software. It took them 3 years, but their Series A was a $20 million round. And today, in aggregate, they have raised about $1.5 billion in capital for the business, and doing about $550 million in revenue. It is the largest vertical SaaS company here in the US. And speaking about vertical SaaS, it is one of the major categories that Mucker invests in. The first evolution in enterprise software was really kind of creating horizontal applications, accounting, human resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the next evolution from that is really software for a specific industry tailored to make them successful, soup to nuts, whatever it is, not CRM, not accounting, but everything, right? And that's what small business and mid-market owners are looking for. It is a core thesis for Mucker. It's an area that we made multiple investments and have created 2 or 3 unicorns besides server-side.
That's amazing. I think while we're on that topic, I think for Mucker, sectors or industries that you guys focus on, or I think you're agnostic towards background and profile, but sectors and companies, maybe you can expand on a little.
Yeah, I'll talk about stages first.
Okay.
Mucker invests anywhere from $100,000 when it's 2 guys garage with an idea, all the way to up about $6 million into a startup. We view ourselves as kind of the incubator, the accelerator, the early stage venture fund that helps entrepreneurs build their business. And at some point, they graduate from working with us and they get money from the Sequoia, the Benchmark, the Greycroft, Greylock of the world that are the famous VC funds that will invest 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million, right? And we have the relationship to do that. Today, the fund is about $370 million. So that enables us to invest broadly across multiple geographies, including Taiwan, as well as multi-stage, and sometimes multiple stages at a time, right? And that's because we saw the journey at Honey and Service Time. When they couldn't raise money, imagine if we had the money to give them, they'll go faster, nobody will go hungry, I can own more of the company and make more money eventually, great outcome. So Mucker grew to become bigger and bigger and bigger over the last 10 years so that we can support our entrepreneurs, not just at the first check, but the second check or even the third check. And that's why Mucker is the way it is. From the sector perspective, we do about half consumer, half enterprise, like Jerry said. Although consumer is a category where you need to have an amazing product, amazing marketing intuition, an amazing kind of cultural fit to be super successful. So typically we only invest in American companies when it comes to consumer startups. And then on enterprise or B2B, it's a high margin business, right? Software, you build it once, you sell it many times, so your margins are really high. Right? It takes nothing to copy code over, if you will, right? And especially with cloud. So in geographies where capital is super constrained, and this is no longer LA, but places like New Orleans where we invest, or Columbus in the US where we invest, or in Taiwan and Taipei, where capital is very constrained, margin is super important, and software is perfect. You sell to 5 customers, you can get to profitability and hire more people. Right? Look at Service Time. They were able to just simply hire and grew to 100 people company simply with just revenue rather than needing capital from outside. So we really like enterprise software and B2B, and really do feel like it is the future for a lot of these underfunded kind of geographies, including Taiwan, to really kind of build venture scalable large businesses. Some other category we invest in include fintech. We do a lot of marketplaces. We invest in consumer kind of subscription startups like content, and health and wellness is a big category for us. The intersection is health and SaaS. It's also super interesting. Like we are horizontal in the sense that we invest in a lot of different style and type of companies, and that gives us knowledge about industry so we can pass from one founder to the other. So we'll continue to do that, but there are certainly things that are hot right now, as well as things that we like from the business model perspective.
Wonderful. Thanks for elaborating on that. I think in addition to that, in Taiwan, I think there's been a few investments that you guys have made. I guess, could you share at least maybe one of these examples, and then maybe a little what you know and what made you interested in them?
Sure. I think Trenton might be on here somewhere, and
yes,
my
hopefully
my favorite story. And he has given me a lot of confidence and continue to double down in Taiwan. I met Trenton in the beginning of COVID, so maybe almost 2 years ago. And the first thing I noticed is that he asked me a lot of questions, a lot more than most entrepreneurs. Most of the time, it's me asking questions. But Trenton was asking me all these questions. And he wasn't afraid of showing me that he didn't know, and he was just super curious. Despite his lack of knowledge, he has built an amazing product that he spent 3 years building, and yet it has started to grow, but the churn rate was super low. So the customers are happy. And what turned out was that Trenton didn't really have a go-to-market motion. And part of that is based in Taiwan. It's hard to recruit people in the US that knows how to do this. It's hard to meet other entrepreneurs that are also kind of building the same type of business, can trade notes and trade secrets and trade tricks with you. And we had a ton of experience in vertical SaaS, and I understood that the freight forwarding business didn't quite have a cloud-based competitor in the space, and surprisingly found one in Taiwan. I knew the company could be international. There are customers already international. It was a business that had a global DNA even before we got involved. So it had potential to be a category-defined company, and where it's based doesn't really matter. All that matters is that we had a great product. Everything else could be built and fixed and added and augmented. And of course, I think 2 years later, Trenton tripled the revenue of the business, and we just finished closing a major round led by American venture capitalists. It's probably one of the largest kind of SaaS Series A rounds, actually probably in all of Southeast Asia. I'll let Trenton kind of announce when the time comes, but I'm really excited and really proud of where we landed and how the journey to here. My hope is that I can find one Trenton, one Go Free Trade a year in Taiwan, and if I can do that, then Taiwan might be even better than Columbus. Might not be better than LA, but certainly better than a lot of the cities in the US, right? And Mucker will be super successful.
Wonderful! What a great inspiration, huh? Both congrats to you, Will, Mucker, as well as to Go Freight and Trenton. That's great. I have a soft spot in my heart for logistics, and Go Freight definitely is been a winner in one of those. Been a winner in that case. Pulling back specifically from, let's say, Taiwan or specific founders, what do you think from where you sit are potential challenges for founders in the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months, year or two, in the short, medium term? Because the market seems to be, I don't want to say volatile, but definitely a lot of fluctuation. Love to hear your thoughts on some of the challenges that they may be experiencing or soon to be experiencing.
If you are a founder today with an existing company, the road is definitely choppy and hard, and lean into kind of the founder spirit to really struggle for success and really manage your burn, and lean with your VCs to really kind of problem solve. So I'm very busy this day. I'm not gonna pretend that everything is great. The market is terrible, and it might be terrible for another 12 to 24 months. However, if you are a new entrepreneur and you're thinking about starting a business, there's no time better. This is the best time ever to start a company. And if you just pattern match from the past, right? Facebook was started in a recession, so was Google, so was Twitter. Some of the best companies were started because there was a recession, and therefore not a lot of venture capital money was going into your category, and you have the freedom to try, to iterate, to find success, to find the right product, right? It takes 7 years at least, like honey, right? Or 15 or 20 years to build a successful company. I'm sure 15 years from now, whatever the market is not related to what's going on today. It might be good, it might be bad, it might be 14 times better, it might be twice as bad, who knows? But it will have no correlation to what is happening today, right? So if you have the long view, you're building a company for 15 years to build $1 billion unicorn, what happens today doesn't really matter. Now, what does matter is that you have enough capital to get started, and that you stay lean so that you're not burning a lot of capital and you're not dependent on VCs to survive. That's the case anyways in Taiwan, right? Like 6 months ago, it was hard to find venture capital in Taiwan. 6 months later, it is now hard to find venture capital in Palo Alto. So you're going to have less competitors in Palo Alto than you do before. So this is actually a good thing, right? It is probably just as hard as it was 6 months ago to find money in Taiwan. Now it is 10 times harder to find money in Palo Alto than it was 6 months ago. The amount of competition you're going to have is going to be much, much less. And you already know how to be lean. You already know your engineer is going to cost a lot less. You already know the cost of living is much lower in Taiwan, right? The same thing I'm telling to my entrepreneurs in LA is the competitive advantage that the Bay Area has over us is actually half, third, or fourth than it was 6 months ago. This is the perfect time to start a company because you can win with less. They don't have a lot more money than you. You can win with less money now than ever. So one thing, putting our thesis to work, we have made more investments in the last 6 months than the 6 months prior. As long as we find entrepreneurs that are scrappy and know how to deploy their capital slowly and safely, have a very lean engineering team, we all for making these investments because we're not looking for how much money is out there for us to raise. There was never a lot of money for us to raise anyways. We're really focused on, can you build the product? Do customers want to buy it? Will they pay for it? How much they'll pay for it? And how do you find more of them? Right? I think I talked to Ken about this before. For me, it's about, will the dog eat dog food? Right? That's the bigger problem you got to go solve rather than whether you can raise $10 million from Sequoia. Like that's a high class problem you shouldn't be worrying about right now. If you're starting a company, if you will figure out whether the dog will eat the dog food. And that has nothing to do with money. If you have a bad product, whether it's $1 million or $10 million, nobody will buy it anyways.
Totally get it. I mean, just to reiterate, it sounds like scrappy team, right? Built for resilience, iterate, and then good product market fit, and then ultimately large scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Great advice. I think good advice, giving the kind of the landscape that we're going to be looking forward to in the next 12 to 24 months. Huh? Okay. Fair enough. Good. I've heard that story about during a recession, it's a great time to launch a business or do a startup. I think great examples of why that makes sense. I've also heard for like same thing for Uber. I think they were kind of iterating and going along, but not really getting traction until a recession came along, then forced the consumer to adopt their product, right? So a lot of change, a lot of volatility, which is for startups that are nimble and small, it's to their advantage, right? That's great. Yeah. Wonderful. Just curious, specifically to venture side, do you see any macro trends or sectors that I know obviously you guys focus on fintech and SaaS, any sectors that generally do well in recession from your experience, or do you think that will do well?
Yeah, I think SaaS and enterprise are always more resilient to recession. And that's mainly because your customers are enterprises too, right? And they need their software, whether their business is growing at 150 times or going negative 20%, right? Whatever it is, there's always a stickiness to software. And unless they're truly going out of business, they're less likely to churn. In software, we have the saying that we're looking for system of record, right? And system of record is the software that contains all the critical information for your business. It could be about customers, it could be about your financials, it could be about your suppliers, whatever it is, where if you lose that database, you cannot run your business, right? So keep thinking about things that are critical to the function of the business, and they're usually much more resilient to than other categories. Another category we like quite a lot is actually prop tech and construction tech. And what does that mean? That means software that really serves the real estate market, all the way from consumer to developers to construction and all the entire ecosystem around. Again, capital spending will continue, especially here in the US with kind of the Infrastructure Act. And globally, the developing countries cannot stop investing in infrastructure, right? That's a long-term play, no matter how the economies go. You really have to continue to kind of build these things for long-term benefit of your people. And historically, they've been pretty resilient, especially in an inflationary market like this. Flight to quality, flight to assets that generate income, and that's definitely real estate. Will kind of create a cushion to the business. The other thing that we're also taking a lot looking at is healthcare, especially payer-related, insurance-related around healthcare. People get sick whether there's a recession or not, and insurance companies have to pay when people get sick whether it's a recession or not, right? So it is another category we're spending a lot of time looking into. And then lastly, I'll say, like Ken said, in crisis, people change their behavior. And interesting enough, it's only in these recessionary periods to consumer startups, mostly around kind of social networks, create kind of gigantic shifts in consumer behavior. Certainly it's a hard category to invest. 1 out of 1,000 actually becomes successful. But that one could be, worth $100 billion if you find the right one. So we are continuing to looking for consumer startups that really focused on kind of changing consumer behavior because of the economic environment we're in right now.
Got it. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, Will. That was very insightful, very helpful. I'm sure the audience and myself agree with that. Taking a step back, I want to take a quick second to change gears here now. I think we're running out of time. So we're going to move to the Q&A section. I think we have a couple of questions lined up. I think we only have time enough for a couple of questions. But Will, just wanted to thank you for all of your insights, all your stories so far. It's really been quite inspiring and quite, for the lack of a better phrase, magical. It's great to hear. Okay, so first question here, which I think is actually, let me see if I can get this. Okay, so we have talented people in Taiwan, but the problem is ability to scale to global business. Can you talk more about how you can help from the US and international markets?
Yeah, I want to invest in companies in Taiwan that have a global perspective. And what does that mean? They want to build an international company. They have ambitions to be the best in the world, not just best in Taiwan. And they want to have customers in the world. And usually that means the United States. What I ask for the entrepreneurs is that they have the resources and the knowledge to build an amazing product. I cannot help you on building an amazing product. That's all up to you. But anything after that, the recruiting, the sales, the marketing, we can help with. And we know how to enter the US market. Like that's what we do all day here at Mucker. We take startups that are based in Los Angeles that have no customers and get their first, the second, the third, the 30th, the 300th, so that they eventually generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. whether that company is based in Los Angeles or Taiwan doesn't matter as much as it used to be, right? And because of our investment, we can help you build out a team that's not just Taiwanese, that includes Americans and Europeans and whatever it might be, and build an office here in the US so that you can be truly international. It is not as hard as you think. It's mostly just hard work and iteration and getting a little bit of lucky. The hard part is build an amazing product and have amazing engineers so that you can continue to kind of augment and make it better and do it cheaply. That stuff, yeah, I know Taiwan can do. I've seen it, right? And then the easy part is actually building the business and scale it one at a time. That stuff we can help with, and we've done it many, many times in the last 12 years. So we can definitely be someone you can rely on and partner with.
Wonderful. Great. Wow. Great answer. Love it. And I think hopefully it's quite motivational for all the people that are listening. Thank you everyone for all the questions. I think we have time probably for one more. Do we have time or no more? Yeah. Okay, Jerry, I think that was a nod. Okay. So one last question. And again, thank you everyone for all the questions. This one, let's see here. So any suggestions for university startup ecosystems comparable to Stanford University? So I think they're looking for what are good universities that have good startup, programs.
Yeah, Stanford is super unique. And even in the US, there are no comparables. The thing about Stanford is that when you graduate from Stanford, you are already ready to start a company. They have taught you from their curriculum. You have been talking and meeting VCs for all 4 years at college. You have entrepreneurs who are building businesses already when they're in college, and entrepreneurs that graduated 2 years ago and that still hangs out on campus. So there's a ton of institutional knowledge being traded that is almost impossible to learn just being in a classroom. What I tell entrepreneurs in the U.S. outside of Stanford is that there's no point trying to copy Stanford. It's not going to be done. But that doesn't mean that you can't be a great entrepreneur and that you can't build a great company. You just have to take it a little bit slower. And look at my story. I probably took it too fast, right? I started my first company at 22, raised $50 million, hired like 300 people, and raised, and try to go public on no revenue, right? I probably tried it too fast. My recommendation for people in college is, continue to learn as much as you can, but the moment you get to college, go work in an industry where you love the problem you're trying to solve, and you think that there's opportunity for you to innovate. Pick the problem, not necessarily pick the industry, right? I talk about problem. Problem is more important than product. So pick the problem you want to go solve. Maybe it's logistics, maybe it is manufacturing, maybe it's trades, whatever it might be. And then go work for a world-class company, right? Trenton worked at TSMC, right? And that gives you a global perspective with people who are have kind of global education, global work experiences, right? And then work 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And then when you're ready to start a company, go for it, right? You'll be, 26, 27? That's still okay. That's still pretty young. Like you don't have to go start a company at 22, right? Same thing with Jerry. Jerry worked internationally, right? He was in Germany for a few years, right? So this idea that like you can't wait to start a company and you want to do it at 22, a lot of that is like mythology and storytelling. It's actually not that practical, especially if you're not from Stanford. And even from Stanford, you screw up all the time. Look at me, right? So Stanford's unique. I don't think it's something that can be copied. And a lot of universities with billions and trillions of dollars endowment have been trying, and not even Harvard has figured out how to copy Stanford. So there's no point. You can create your own Stanford through your work experiences. And that is actually much easier than actually trying to get into Stanford.
Oh, what great advice. I think another one to add to my wealth of advice from you over the last years through my last 2-3 startups, actually. So Will, thank you very much. That's much appreciated for me, and I'm sure the audience loves it as well. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time. Thank you, Will, for all the stories, all the insight, all the advice. I'm sure everyone appreciated it as much as I did. Jerry, handing it back to you. Will, sorry, real quick, any final words?
My email address is william@mucker.com. It's actually on the Mucker website, so I freely share with everyone in the world. So if you want to email me and ask me a question, go for it. And Jerry's at jerry@mucker.com, right? Like the whole point of being a VC is not to create this like idea that we're hard to reach or this is some sort of special job. It is not. We're here to serve you, the entrepreneur, and being accessible, returning emails, answering sometimes dumb questions, quote unquote, because they're not actually dumb, right? Like Trenton asked me a lot of questions that I actually appreciated, right? So don't be shy. Like the entrepreneur's job is to be aggressive and seek out whatever you want to accomplish. If that means writing an email to somebody you don't know, that's actually probably the easiest part of being an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful. How generous. Thank you so much, Will. Handing it back to you, Jerry. Thanks again, everyone.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Kenny, for great questions. And thanks, Will, for your great sharing and also your experiences. 所以我们现在再次感谢大家的出席，那也再次的感谢这个经济部中小企业处，还有这个亚湾新创园的这个指导。那我们 MuckerLab 呢，一直都是在欢迎各位这个新创呢能够来申请。那 MuckerLab 就像刚刚William讲的，不是一个 typical accelerator， 那我们是采 rolling basis， 所以任何时间都欢迎申请。那我们没有一定的这个课程或是 batch， 那所以我们就是1对1的辅导。那 Will 也是花很多的时间看我们在这个新创跟创办人身上，所以欢迎申请。我们的这个申请资讯呢都会在下面提出，所以如果你有兴趣的话，欢迎申请我们 MuckerLab。那我们这个很高兴的能够分享我们在美国资源给所有台湾的朋友。再次感谢Kenny 还有 Will 还有所有大家的出席。那我们下次的活动再见咯，谢谢，拜拜。
拜拜。